Hello and welcome to a brand new Arseblog Arsecast right here on arseblog.com. How are you? Hope you're well. Thank you very much indeed, as always, for being here. Yes, I know it's Wednesday, but we played last night, and obviously the podcast world is changing. You've got to adapt. You've got to be able to go with the flow. People want post-game content pretty soon after the game is done, rather than waiting until a Friday, and that will be reflected, as it was last season, in the Arsecast schedule. We will do our best to get a podcast to you the morning after every game, whether it's a Wednesday morning, Thursday morning. I don't think there's any more Thursday games, so it's unlikely to be a Friday morning. But this is the way it's going to go over the course of this season. So anyway, welcome to the show. It is Arsecast 800, a nice round number. And if you've been here for 880 or 800, thank you so much as always for listening and welcome to the show. Today, of course, we're talking about our 2-0 win over PSG in the Champions League last night. I think a very interesting game, quite a lot to unpack from it, so we're just going to get on with it. And with me to do that this morning is Phil Costa. Good morning, Phil.
Morning, Andrew. How are we doing?
We're doing all right, actually. Doing fine. This was, I think, quite an interesting game because there is this sort of dynamic of Champions League, big Champions League nights, and maybe we talked about this a little bit when we previewed the game over on Patreon a bit. The PSG are obviously a glamour side in Europe. Is it manufactured? Is it because of their ownership and all that? Yes, absolutely. But they are considered, rightly or wrongly, or somewhere in between, one of the big sides in Europe. Semi-finalists last season in this competition. They're coming here in the group stage, and you're looking to see what kind of performance, what kind of display Arsenal can put in, and also what way are PSG going to approach this game? How are they going to respect what Arsenal do at this moment in time? So I thought that was like just a fascinating sort of build up to this game, and I think it played out in a very interesting way.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know if it's the new format or maybe just the constant bombardment of games that we can't really process big nights anymore for what they are, but I wasn't really feeling very Champions League-y, if that makes sense. Always games under the lights at the Emirates, they will always be special. But this was like a huge game. On paper, this was a huge game for Arsenal and one that we should have been excited about and ready for, and I'm sure everybody was, but I don't know why. I didn't really grasp it until the team came out, I think.
Sure.
And I'm not sure why that was or if you felt something similar, but it was an interesting tactical battle. Two big teams, obviously Atalanta are very accomplished in their own right, but they're not really on this level. But yeah, absolutely a big game. And as we spoke about in the small preview that we did, it's a very different PSG to what we've known over the last couple of years, which I thought added, something extra to the game.
Sure. I think you're right about this new format playing into how we feel about these Champions League games, because I think with 6 games in a group stage, you're very focused. When you've got 8 games and then potentially another 2 games before you get to the knockout stages, it does feel a bit elongated, and we're not used to it either. So we're not quite sure what anything means at this point. Nevertheless, I think your not comparison, but the way PSG have gone from being a team that would bring in players like Ibrahimovic, Beckham, Messi, Neymar, these guys who Mbappe obviously, of course, but I think that's slightly different because they just snapped up the best young player in the world at that point. But they were spending huge money on big players with big reputations, big salaries, big transfer fees, all that kind of stuff. It was like it was a carbon copy of the Galacticos, basically, even though, there were some salutary lessons to be learned from that particular project. But this is a much different PSG side, a younger PSG side, probably, one that is still developing and finding its feet against an Arsenal team that I think still has a reputation for being young, because in some ways there are young players in there. Some of our best players are still very young. Bukayo Saka, 23. William Saliba, 23. Gabriel Martinelli is 23. So these young guys are there. But I think there is a maturity to this Arsenal team, which obviously has developed over the last couple of seasons. But I think maybe when you look at where the two teams are in their development, we're a little bit ahead of where PSG are. And for me, the interesting part was, how do they match up? Because I'm not going to say PSG have it easy in every game, but certainly there is a significant quality gap between them and most other sides in Liga. Therefore, they're sort of playing games that people expect them to win week in, week out. Whereas I think the Premier League, even if there is a gap in quality between top and bottom, there is a lot more quality, generally speaking, which makes the league a bit more competitive. So coming from that, I'm not going to say non-competitive environment, but a less competitive environment, to face off against a team which has been, really, really good and really solid for 2 years, was a very interesting aspect to this game.
Yeah, I said before the game that even without Ousmane Dembele, Fabian Ruiz, Randal Kolo Muani and others, this was still a very talented PSG team. But what stood out to me was they are very young, very small and inexperienced at this level. And I think you could see at times they were able to get on the ball, move it around. Vitinha, one of the best deep-lying midfielders in Europe. Zaire Emery as well, very talented. But that first half in particular was an obvious physical mismatch. And we absolutely suffocated them through set pieces and the way we pressed. That was probably the best I've seen Arsenal press this season. And we really identified their left side in particular as a spot of weakness because they couldn't get out. Every Nuno Mendes pass to Bradley Barcola down the line was getting eaten up by Timber. And if Timber couldn't get there, Saliba was just there to mop up behind him. And for all the talent they do have in the team, even Desiree Doué coming in, they've got talent in the back line, William Pacho, Hakimi, Marquinhos, obviously, very good, experienced players. But there was just a stark physical mismatch on not only on paper, but when the game started as well, you could see it instantly and you just thought, oh God, this is what Arsenal were like 15 years ago when we'd get monstered around by people. And now you can just see the physical development of us in almost every position where we look absolutely bloody massive. Yeah,
I was going to send you a message about 20 minutes, 25 minutes into the first half going, I feel like if something is going to happen for us, it's going to come because of the pressure we're putting on their left side between William Pacho and Nuno Mendes, who I think are both excellent. And Nuno Mendes going forward, I thought that battle between himself and Saka, the individual one-on-one battle, was really interesting. He had a moment up the other end. I think he cracked a shot not too far wide. But I found encouraging in this game the coordination of the Arsenal press. Without Martin Odegaard, who we have used basically as the leader of that, like he's the trigger, he's the guy who calls everybody forward, but there was such coordination with which Arsenal did it. Donnarumma maybe not the best in the world with the ball at his feet, doesn't have the best feet for a big man, perhaps. Didn't have the best hands last night either, we'll come to that. But the way that Arsenal pressed, you're right to point out Timber snapping into tackles, winning the ball, Saliba, and the fact that from basically their own corner flag time and time again, the only option that they had available to them was to either whack it up the line or try and whack it infield. And even when they whacked it infield, there were Arsenal players in there, Thomas Partey making interceptions, pressing high up the pitch. That sort of coordination between the front of the press and the middle of the press, if you like, was really effective for Arsenal yesterday.
Completely. And I don't think I would label Arsenal a pressing team. I think we can press very well, but it's not our MO. It's not like it's not like a Dortmund under Klopp, for example, or even a Liverpool under Klopp, or other teams you see, a Leipzig or someone like that, who can really, really make pressing their identity. But yesterday, or let's say in general, I think there are games at the Emirates where, I go back to Liverpool last season, to Chelsea last season, to Newcastle at home last season, where we really look exceptional in the press. And last night was the first time I've seen us do it really well this year. And you're absolutely right. PSG couldn't get out. They couldn't play out. They couldn't go long because they had Lee Kang-in playing as the kind of false nine who was floating around. And again, physical mismatch against William Saliba, against Gabriel, against Partey. They did have threat in behind. But in that first half, there was one occasion where Bradley Barcola got in behind and he tried to shimmy past Timber with a nice little ball roll. And I actually thought he got beaten. But there was just a stick out of the leg that stopped him from getting past. But that was the only real occasion, maybe with Hakimi as well running beyond Calafiori. But you can expect stuff like that to happen against quality opposition. I just thought it was really obvious how much stronger and physically fit we were compared to them. Let's be honest, they're a team of teenagers. You know, they've got teenagers all over the pitch. Joao Neves, Zaire Emery, Doué, Barcola, and we monstered them. And that press in particular, keeping them in that corner of the pitch, time and time again, the ball was coming out there. Goalkeeper to William Pacho to Mendes, throw in, breaking down, Arsenal intercepting the ball. They couldn't get any flow going in their game. And I think it was a brilliant piece of coaching from Arteta to kind of identify that issue.
Another thing that struck me was the variety with which Arsenal can play, because PSG tried to press themselves. They tried from our goal kicks to put pressure on us. I think we did well to bypass it quite a few times. But the other aspect of the first half, I think in particular, we saw very early on, PSG tried to press. David Raya was closed down. Maybe they did well to cut off the passing lanes. What we had was Gabriel Martinelli streaking through the middle and an incredible long pass from Raya to Martinelli, which I think he was quite unlucky not to get a touch on, because if he touches that, I think it goes beyond the goalkeeper. And we're talking about, one of the passes of the season coming from our goalkeeper. But his ability to distribute from deep, it's not always perfect, but when he gets it right, it's really, really effective. And I think also, and we'll come to talk about him a little bit more, but Kai Havertz, this role, when we play without Martin Odegaard, and we've got Kai Havertz, we've got Leandro Trossard on the pitch, and they're sort of interchangeable in a way, but when we're looking to stretch play, Havertz is basically playing as a number 9, as a target man, as an outlet for this team. And to have that guy up there who is willing to put in that kind of work, I thought the post-match interview he did was really, really interesting, where he said, a few years ago, I wasn't really a guy who was into all that, challenging for duels. He was a bit more flitty about, I guess you would say, not really a physical player, because despite his size, and I remember talking to you about this when we signed him, you were like, he's 6'4", just bulk up a bit, get stuck in a bit. You've got the size, you've got the presence to do it. But the way he has come to love that aspect of what he's being asked to do, I think you can draw a through line between the development of that aspect of his game and the goal scoring aspect of his game, because what he is relishing all the challenges that the game gives you, winning those challenges, whether they're aerial, whether he's holding the ball up with his back to goal, or as we saw with the goal that he scored, getting into the box at the right time to get on the end of a really good cross. But I think that aspect of how we can play now, it makes it so much more difficult for the opposition.
What I love about this team is how many faces they have and their ability to adapt to different opposition and various game states with ease. Amy Lawrence wrote an article this morning in The Athletic, which, funnily enough, wasn't about how Arsenal are responsible for the downfall of modern football.
Right.
Kind of along similar lines. If we need to have the ball and be in charge of games, sustain attacking pressure, we can do it. If we need to sit in our mid-block, surrender the ball a bit, and completely, congest that middle area, we can do it. If we need to be more direct and play over the press, go long through Raya and get players forward in transition, we can do that as well. If we need to drop into a football terrorism deep block, heading and clearing everything that comes close to our goal, we can do it. So I'm just so consistently impressed with how we can mold ourselves to suit different moments within a game. And look, of course, PSG had a couple of moments. Joao Neves hit the bar, Nuno Mendes grazed the post. They had a couple of shots from distance, but we limited them to 0.31 XG last night. Their lowest XG output in the 69 Champions League games for which Opta publicizes its data. So,
hadn't they scored in something like 50 consecutive Champions League games, something like that?
Yeah. And, it just shows you that even when we did tire in the second half, and you could see that, we were never really in any danger. They had a couple of moments, yes, of course, but you can expect that. And they made a couple of changes. I think bringing Ruiz and Colomwani on helped them. But you always feel comfortable watching us defend because we're really damn good at it. And I just think it's such a testament to the coaching, the standard of coaching of this team, because so often, and I think this has been a topic of discussion over the last couple of weeks, based on some of the narrative that has been going around Arsenal. How many years and how many seasons did we have to put up with they're soft, men against boys, no plan B, all of this criticism about the way that we played and how sort of single-minded we were under Arsene Wenger. There's none of that now, not at all. And I just love how committed everybody is to each phase of the play. The details matter. Your shape matters. The basics matter. And every margin we can find, we look to maximize it. And that is football.
Yeah.
That is football. Finding any way to win. And you need to be malleable and moldable enough to do it. And I'm just so impressed with what this team were able to do in almost every phase of play. Yeah,
we might come back to that because there was some interesting stuff from Bukayo Saka on that. And obviously he had a big contribution in this game. But let's talk about the goals that we scored. Leandro Trossard, every time he plays, every time he does something, all of the commentators, they talk about what a signing he's been for Arsenal. And if you remember, Arsenal were trying to sign Mikhailo Mudryk and, they pivoted to Leandro Trossard. What a great decision that was. Arsenal fans will be, thinking bullet dodged, etc., etc. But there is something about this player at this moment in time where I think he is, whether it's a streak of form or whether he's just like a guy in his absolute prime at the peak of his talent and peak of his ability and peak of his form, that he is a difference maker. He is somebody who, even as we saw the other day against Leicester, just drifts to the back post, puts the ball back in the mixer. We get a little bit of a lucky ricochet, goes in the back of the net, 3-2. But you're rewarded for your endeavour, and Trossard being in the right place at the right time was certainly that. Yesterday, this connection I think he and Kai Havertz have when they play in this sort of two together is very interesting. They seem to work very well together. They seem to know when to move into different areas of the pitch. And I thought what Trossard did in this instance was absolutely superb. Winning the ball on the halfway line, getting away from his marker. Like, he's not the absolute fastest guy you will ever see, but he ran into space. His close control is so good. Technically, we know he's excellent. The ball just doesn't get away from him. He cuts back inside. He looks up to see Havertz, sees exactly the run Havertz is making. The quality of the ball is so good. Like Donnarumma says, I'll have that. It's tempting. It's just perfect to lure the goalkeeper out. And the run from Havertz, the timing of that run, not just to get into that area, but to stay onside, to leap, win the header, head the ball in for 1-0. Just a brilliant combination between those two guys.
Completely. Football is all about pairings and relationships. And I think from the first moment these two found each other, there seems to be a chemistry and understanding of where they will be, who can vacate which spaces and when, a positional fluidity between the number 8 and 9 position. And maybe you can even call them dual or double 10s. His end product, Trossard's end product or output has never been in question, but he has been known to drop the occasional stinker. And there was like an ongoing joke about, Trossard's been awful today, he's going to score. But in recent weeks, I feel like his performances have been very good too. And last night he was excellent. He worked hard. He seemed to find an extra bit of physicality to burst away from players. The cross he puts in is absolutely brilliant. The trajectory is perfect. It's so difficult to defend those. As a centre half yourself, you will know that. In that corridor of uncertainty between the defenders and the goalkeeper, who comes out to deal with it, who heads it away. It's unbelievably brave as well from Havertz, because you mentioned Donnarumma there, maybe not being so good with his feet. He is massive. And if that guy's coming out at you to try and punch the ball, and let's say he misses the ball and gets your head, that's a sore one. So he's incredibly brave. The run is perfect. And I just think where he and Gabriel Jesus differ at the moment, sometimes the easier ball is the best one. And I think Trossard can be guilty of overplaying at times. But yesterday I saw him playing the easy pass. Sometimes you don't need to take on 2 or 3 players. You can pass to the guy that's next to you or behind you or inside, or, you know, and there's just a simplicity and efficiency to his game that I've always loved and enjoyed. But you're absolutely right to nail the relationship between these two, because I think it's very difficult to talk about one at the moment without talking about the other. And I think that is part of why Trossard is playing, because of this relationship, and also we've needed to find different ways of playing without Ødegaard. So I'm really happy with how this relationship seems to be blossoming. But also, I think you were right to nail his age and profile and how he just knows what to do on the pitch and when.
We have needed to, maybe not in some of the games that we've played of late because of the fixtures we had, because of the kind of games they were. When you think about the derby, you think about Man City away. But I wonder, you know, Atalanta away, did we have someone who really picked up the creative slack from Martin Ødegaard? Perhaps not. Last night, I think we saw that from Trossard, where he is capable of finding those moments of being a difference maker. And I think his form is very interesting. I was just looking at the stats. It's it's not amazing numbers. It's 2 goals and an assist in 8 games, but it's only 415 minutes because he has been a little bit on the bench at times this season. I think the goal against Leicester, while it won't go down statistically for him, morally it's his goal. You know, he just feels like somebody who could, if you need a game to be broken open, he could be that guy and can be that guy when it is tight and when it is difficult to sort of create the sort of opportunities that we might make with Martin Ødegaard on the pitch. And for Havertz, by the way, it's 6 games in a row scoring at home.
Brilliant. Yeah. It's funny you mentioned it earlier about how we spoke about him when he signed for the New Player podcast and even during the first few months of his Arsenal career, because I was frustrated with him, because what I was watching and had been watching during his whole career in England was a player who had everything: technique, physical power, tactical intelligence, yet no authority to stamp himself on games. And there was a timidity to his play. He was getting bumped, bounced, muscled off the ball too easily, not striking the ball with any conviction. What we are watching now might as well be a different player. Or maybe the player that was promised all along, just with a club and a coach and a group who believe in him. And he was always going to be important in the absence of Martin Ødegaard. But like, wow, talk about stepping up. He has become the technical and tactical reference point for this team who, let's be honest, have needed to find different ways of playing. And Havertz is absolutely central to all of those. He is one of the first names on this team sheet now. Simple as. I can't imagine us playing without him. I mean, he can play in midfield to give us range and physicality. He can be the magnet for goal kicks and more direct play to get us up the pitch. He can crash the box and provide aerial threat, as we saw last night. His overall play, I think, is becoming much neater. Really, I'm so impressed. And I spoke about Arsenal having different faces earlier. Most of that is because of Havertz, who feels like a cheat code in that sense, because he can float, he can play here, he can go up front, he can go left. And I love the quote after the game. Back in the day, I wasn't the player who won the jewels and everything, but right now I love it.
Yeah.
And Kai, we love it as well.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure Mikel Arteta does, because that is the quote that will get him, you know, that will put a smile on his face this morning. I'm absolutely sure of that.
Yeah, I think something that doesn't often get mentioned about Havertz, because I think there is this impression of him as a still maybe a slightly timid guy. And when you see him speak, he's very softly spoken. He does come across like a fairly unassuming, I'm not going to say shy guy, but certainly, you know, not that big, loud, brash personality that you see in some footballers. But he's sort of low-key snide, which I think is a really important part of what this team is doing right now, that there is an undercurrent of cynicism through this team that I think, this is not a criticism, by the way, I think is absolutely 100% necessary for us to go on and do what we're doing and to hopefully achieve the things we want to achieve. But no player got booked more for Arsenal last season than Kai Havertz. Like, he does put himself about. He will be cynical. He will make those fouls. Some of them, a little bit unfortunate. I think he's, been a bit unlucky with a couple of the bookings that he's got. But, he's a difficult guy to play against. When he's got his back to goal, he's tall, he's spindly, he's got elbows, not quite Peter Crouch. But, if you're a central defender and Kai Havertz is there swinging his arms around, I think could have been Vitinha last night who caught one in the mush from Havertz, who was just, turning around. I think it was just a little bit unfortunate. But that aspect of who he is, when people talk about goal scoring, they talk about assists, they talk about what he can be as a target man. There is something else there to him, and not just him, of course, but, that isn't something people necessarily associate with Kai Havertz.
No, not at all. And I always go back to that game at Newcastle, the ridiculous Joe Willock is the ball out, we can push you in the back and score goals, apparently, game. Because I think for me, and for him, that was a turning point. That tackle he steamed into on the touchline was a big turning point for me in terms of watching him and seeing what he can offer this team. It was the first time I'd really seen him go, all right, fuck this. I'm going to do something that gives my team that gives me a bit of presence on this pitch. And from that point forward, I feel like his Arsenal career has changed for the better. And I agree. There are challenges and pushes and elbows that maybe fly sometimes, but he gets it. So why can't he give it?
Sure.
And you absolutely need it. If you're going to lead the line at the highest level of Premier League football and in Europe, you need to be able to hold yourself. And what I see from him now is a confidence in his body and his physicality. He runs defenders. He can fight them. Really, I've been so impressed. He's even showing me aspects to his game that I didn't think were there or in his locker. So when you think about leaders in this team, I think there are obvious ones. Ødegaard, Gabriel, Saka.
Yeah.
He's just up there with me now. Or for me, not with me, for me. I'd like to consider myself a leader for this Arsenal team, but I think sitting from behind this microphone, that would be a bit rich. But I think he's really stepped up into a more senior role. And a lot of that has come from the faith that's been shown in him.
Yeah,
I think.
Agree. I think he's relishing the responsibility from winning headers to scoring goals and being, a real difference maker like Trossard is for Arsenal. Speaking of difference makers, Bukayo Saka with the second goal. The first time Arsenal have scored a direct free kick since September 2021 when Martin Ødegaard scored against Burnley. I think they're over 51 attempts. I think I saw Harvey Downs of Opta mention that. This was not your classic direct free kick goal. It was a free kick out on the right-hand side where that battle between Saka and Mendes saw Mendes just go a little bit too far, committed a foul. I was expecting Saka to deliver it somewhere between penalty spot and back post. Instead, I don't know if it was deliberate. I don't know if he miskicked it. I don't know if this was the plan all along. I don't think he in any way expected to score by doing what he did, but he played it low into the near post. Players ran across, legs were going everywhere, and Donnarumma, if he wasn't great for the first one, I think he was worse for this one.
A bit slow, wasn't he? And I think he can give off those vibes because he's just a giant man. I think it was intentional, though. I think the routine itself was intentional, and I saw a few in this game, and I love it. I absolutely love the ambition and creativity we have from these set pieces, and whatever Nicolas Jova is on, double it, triple it, put the check down and tell him to write down whatever he wants.
Can I ask you a question? Just before I let you continue on this one. Do you remember the free kick from out wide, or maybe it was a little further in, and there was all this confusion because Martinelli was down holding the back of his leg and nobody quite knew, should we take it? Are they going to take it? Are they going to bring somebody on for Martinelli to get some treatment? He was sort of kneeling down even when the referee blew the whistle. He didn't do anything. And I think the PSG players looked a little bit confused. Do you think that was that Martinelli actually being hurt, or was this just another ruse to cause uncertainty within the opposition defence as we're taking a free kick? Because that's what I thought. Initially I thought, like, well, he's down, he's hurt, why isn't anyone coming on to do anything? And then I just like, oh, maybe this is to sort of distract the opposition. And it was a ball from Saka where I think he played it short to Rice and then played a cross towards the back post where Trossard had made a run and stayed onside. The
very
ball,
intentional run as well.
Yeah, the ball was just overhit, and I just wondered about that Martinelli thing. Was that like another level to this set-piece mayhem that we're capable of?
Potentially. It might have been a chance for players to communicate, or maybe a message to come over from the touchline. Again, you could see it was very rehearsed because they were all bunched up again, the Arsenal players. And then Trossard sneaks around the back towards the back post where PSG didn't pick him up. And then the rest of the players ran towards the middle. So there would have obviously been a cutback in mind where they would have all been on side, and then hopefully someone in the middle would have had an easy tap in. So I love it. I really, really love it. And we've spoken on the 30 about this before, that when teams show a bit of creativity to try and do something different from set pieces, I can respect it, because it's something that maybe you take for granted, or teams can take for granted, just to put it in the mixer. And while I think it's perfectly fine and valid to do so, these margins can really make a difference. And I think you're seeing now with this group, obviously, we have individuals that can attack a ball really well. I think of Saliba, Gabriel, Calafiori now looks a big aerial threat. Marino's coming into the team as well. But we really seem to be dedicating time and attention and care to these routines. And I think it's so impressive, really. If that Trossard one came off, you know, we would have been laughing, because PSG had no idea. Absolutely no idea what was happening. So maybe it was intentional.
Yeah.
And I like to think that it was, because there's too much precedent and proof for us to rule out anything at this point, really. I believe so. Yeah.
Saka, by the way, I saw a stat last night that only Harry Kane and Vinicius Jr. have got more goal involvements than Bukayo Saka since the start of last season's Champions League. And, you know, we talked about it. This was his last year was his first Champions League experience. And I think he scored our first goal back in the Champions League, if I remember. And you know, his output is something I think that is remarkable. But there was a very interesting little clip where after the game, he was talking to the Amazon people, I think it was, who were doing the game. We had it on Premier Sports here in Ireland, so we didn't get the Amazon thing. But he was asked by Frank Lampard, of all people, if doing the, in inverted commas, dirty work of defending and stuff, was that something he learned from Mikel Arteta? And this is what he had to say in response to that.
Yeah, of course, you know, all attacking players, we're all attacking minded, we want to go forward, but the manager has emphasised a lot the other part of the game. I'm sure if you stand on the side, you can hear him a lot when we're out of possession as well. But yeah, it does take a lot of sacrifice and discipline, because, being honest, I do want to be more forward, but, you know, it's what the team requires. And, you know, when I see the results, you know, we have a lot of clean sheets, so it's paying off. So it just encourages me to keep doing it. Me, Gabby, all the other players that play wing in this team.
We talked about Havertz learning to relish the physical side of the game. Bukayo Saka there, by his own admission, I'd like to get forward more, but I enjoy this when I can help the team contribute to a clean sheet. And this is where, again, maybe it ties back into what you were saying about the many facets, the many faces of Arsenal, where we can do all of these things. And Arteta wanting his players to be able to do all of these things is part of why we are as good as we are right now, that there is a willingness from these guys to do work that maybe I'm not saying they don't want to do their job or defend or work hard or anything like that, but, you know, forward players, they do like to stay up the pitch a bit. They do want to score goals. They want to make assists. They want to get involved more in the attacking side of the game. And there are countless examples of players, one who was at PSG, for example, who's not there now and is at Real Madrid, who last season, because of what he can do in the attacking third, is sort of stripped of any responsibility to do anything from a defensive perspective. But Arteta's players don't have that. They are asked to do it. Everybody defends from front to back to try and ensure that we are a solid team. And Bukayo Saka certainly last night did that, and does that throughout the season. Does it not bring into sharp focus, though, his numbers from an attacking perspective, that even with the work that he is doing there, he's still got this incredible output in terms of goals and assists. And so far this season, from 7 games, it's or from 9 games rather, it's 5 assists and 2 goals. So really, really impressive numbers.
There is such an efficiency to Bukayo Saka that I think we've come to take for granted, whether it's his touch efficiency. There's never any overdoing anything. It's always one touch, stand the defender up. Can I shoot? Can I go to the back post? Who's in the box that I can bounce something off? There is a consistency to his delivery. His ball striking has come on huge amounts. I mean, when he first broke through, you could see that he had the eye for goal, but maybe not the power. I don't think anybody's complaining about that now. So I just love how, regardless of whether he's playing a 2 out of 10, which is very rare, a 5, a 7, a 9, you will always expect him to come up with a goal or an assist. And I think these players are absolutely valuable. But also it goes back to what you were saying before about how you need to be defensively switched on and committed, because it's quite easy or simple. You cannot be a good team if everybody is not singing from the same song sheet.
Sure.
Chelsea under Mourinho, Barcelona under Pep, Real Madrid under Ancelotti. All of the best teams in recent memory. Liverpool under Jurgen Klopp, Man City under Pep. What do they all do? Defend from the front. Sadio Mane, Salah, Pedro. All of these guys, that Casemiro, Sergio Ramos, you think of some of these huge defensive players that these teams had. You cannot be the best team around if you're not switched on defensively. And that requires buy-in, energy, physicality, commitment from every single player on that pitch. And Martinelli is brilliant at it. Bukayo Saka is brilliant at it. Havertz is great. Ødegaard is great. No more luxury players anymore. You can't afford to carry them. And I just love the ferocity and the commitment in which we play. I mean, we haven't even spoken about the fullbacks yet. Marino came on as well for his debut, won 4 out of 6 duels, even though he looked a little bit off the pace. I mean, you need it. You absolutely need it. And yeah, for all the brilliance of Saka in attacking areas, how many times do you see him in the corner flag blocking crosses?
Yeah. Even late on, he was there to block a cross out for a PSG corner. I mean, I think the halftime change was, one that was enforced. Obviously, Jurrien Timber, Mikel Arteta said he felt something muscular. He was uncertain. I didn't want to take any risks. He's been out for a year. He's played a lot of minutes, probably more minutes than we wanted in the last few weeks, and we have to manage him. Get that completely. What a performance in that first half from him. I looked at him at one point, and I think it was Bradley Barcola who tried to sort of muscle him, and it was like seeing a toddler run into a brick wall. He's just so strong. Like, he is so physical. I know he's not the tallest, but he's like he's sort of like a pit bull. Like, he's all muscle, if you like.
He's a scrum half. If he was playing rugby, he'd be a scrum half.
Well, I'm not a rugby guy.
That short, stocky build, quick, punchy, physical. He's brilliant. The way he eats up ground is terrifying, genuinely terrifying. And he looks so solid. And if he gets boshed and bumped around, he's never falling down.
No.
He is so good. And I love this kind of all action feeling to his play. I mean, even that one, some players.
Yeah, that one you talked about. Yeah, no, when Barcola got in behind and Timber made the tackle in the box, what did he do? He just sort of shimmied past one guy, played a pass into midfield and kept running. It was like,
yeah.
In like 2 seconds, he'd made up 30 yards of ground. It's like, what the fuck? It's so impressive.
Yeah, and it shows you, obviously we didn't see enough of him to realise the absence. I think last year, obviously, he had a good pre-season. He came in against Forest and got injured. And we just accepted it that he would be gone for the year, for the season. But now we're starting to see him, what he can do in full flow. Maybe he's not even at full flow yet. Playing regularly at left back, at right back, can come in field, can overlap. And it just goes to show you what we missed with him last season. And also then it becomes a domino effect about having to overplay Ben White. You've got injury issues elsewhere with Tomiyasu, Zinchenko. So it really is a feeling of regret with him about last season because he looks an outstanding player. And again, we speak about the faces and the facets of this Arsenal team. He gives us so much. He gives us so much. And I love that moment on Barcola because he looked beat. I thought he was beaten. And then he just readjusts his body, puts the weight down on his left, sticks a right leg out, but he always looks in control. He's never lunging in or looking uncomfortable. And yeah, just a physical, all-action, intense player. And I think we will grow to love him very quickly.
For sure, if we don't already. But that meant a bit of a rejig. Jakub Kiwior came on to go at left back. You know, as we've said, Kiwior, I think, is a good defender, but can't do what Timber does, what Calafiori does, what Zinchenko does at left back. They tried it, didn't work. I think they've had to say, right, if we're going to play Kiwior at left back, it's got to be a pretty traditional sort of role for him, which is fine because that plays to his strengths. But then you're moving Riccardo Calafiori over to the right-hand side. And I was so interested to see what he would be like there. Would he, on his wrong side, would that slightly inhibit him? Would it change the way that he played? Would it change his mindset? And I think there were a couple of moments where, because it was in inverted commas his wrong side, he's a left-sided centre-half being played at right back, which you very, very, very rarely see, by the way. There were a couple of moments where that ball in behind, in that sort of inside channel between him and Saliba, it worked for PSG a couple of times because I think you have to get used to the positioning. But Calafiori at right back was just unbelievable. The way he tries to win the ball, the interceptions, there was one where we got penalised, I think it was a handball by Saka, but he basically just sort of stood into a tackle and set us free when we were under a little bit of pressure. We were about to go on a break, the referee calls it back because it's a handball, an unfortunate handball by Saka, free kick to PSG. And I think the front-footedness with which he plays is so enjoyable to watch. And I don't know what you think about this. I think there's something quite raw or innocent about how he tries to play the game. And some people might suggest, that'll be something that they knock out of him. But I would hope that this is something that they look at and they try and develop in a more rounded way, if you like. Don't take that away from him. Just refine it. That's exactly the word I was looking for. Because if you can do that, what a fucking player.
He's unbelievable. He's, like Timber, just heaps of fun. Players that do things that when you're watching on your sofa with a beer and maybe a bowl of crisps, you just chuckle to yourself. Or you look at them and you say, these are physical freaks. I mean, I having scouted him obviously for the Arseblog profile and the new player podcast, we spoke about how he was given the keys at Bologna to basically do whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted, and that would be him appearing out on the right wing sometimes, or pushing beyond the striker on occasion, or drifting into midfield. And I think you have to let him do that because that's what makes him special. We can't play him like a Kiwior because what's the point? You might as well put Jakub Kiwior in to play like Jakub Kiwior. We've bought Riccardo Calafiori to play like Riccardo Calafiori. And you're absolutely right. There is a, 6-year-old on a sugar rush feeling to how he plays because he's just challenge, aerial duel, one touch, bounce off. I can go again. There were even parts in the first half. There was a lovely move, I think. It might have been our first chance in the game where Bukayo Saka cut inside and curled over.
Yeah.
Who was the one charging through the middle of the pitch? It was Calafiori.
Yeah, it was Calafiori who set up that chance in where you would expect Martin Odegaard to be, for example.
Exactly. And I just think you nailed it. You can't look. Maybe you can tell him at times or on occasion, don't run 50 yards forward if there's nobody covering. It's just about refining them and timing those forays forward. And I love how he holds himself. There was even that bit with Fabian Ruiz, which I thought was ridiculous that they both got booked, to be honest.
No need.
Minuscule handbags. But Ruiz pushes him and he's trying to do the old thing to the crowd and get everyone up off their feet. But he can give it back. And he was doing the old forehead to forehead. And he was taller than Fabian Ruiz, who's 6'1" as well. So you just look at this team and they're so athletic, so committed, so fun, really. And it's valuable to have them come in. We've absolutely found them over the last couple of weeks. But also I think Ben White is resting up nicely, and his hamstrings and his knees and his ankles are sending a little prayer to these two, because they've given him a chance to rest.
Yeah.
To rest, which is again part of that domino effect. But how much fun are we going to have watching these two guys just like galloping forward is the word I can use. They're just so good, so fun.
Unbelievable. I know fullbacks have sometimes been the catalyst or the conduit for change in football and the way football is played. But I think this idea of having four centre halves at the back that sort of was introduced by, was it Pep, or, it's happened over the years, but technically accomplished defenders at the back. I think what we've got, for example, with Timber, who can play centre-half and has played centre-half a lot for Ajax, Calafiori centre-half as well, in those full-back positions, it's a different dimension. It's very, very exciting. I'm keeping everything crossed, for their fitness. At the moment, I'm slightly like, ooh, are they going to be okay? Because if they are...
Game by game, isn't it? Yeah.
It is a bit game by game, but, if these guys can stay fit and produce stuff like this on a consistent basis, we're just going to make life so much more difficult for the opposition, which is, something I'm looking forward to. A couple of...
Can I just say, I think it's so ridiculous that we get criticised for playing four centre-backs. Because look at how Timber plays, look at how Calafiori plays, look at how Ben White plays. Do you really think we're playing, Tony Pulis, West Brom ball with four centre-backs? No, they are heavily involved in everything that we do in all sides and corners of the pitch. So, we were playing a 2-3-5 yesterday, pressing PSG in their corner. So do one with that criticism, because it just shows that you don't watch Arsenal.
Fair enough. I'm with you on that. Couple of other things. Obviously, PSG made a couple of changes in the second half. They brought on Fabian Ruiz. They brought on... Kolo Muani for Doué, and I think it was Vitinha, was it? And it did make a difference, and they did have a couple of moments. There was a shot Raya saved. It was swerving all over the place. The one from the corner that hit the bar, touch fortunate, but sometimes you make your own luck. We responded with a change, bringing off Thomas Partey, putting on Mikel Merino. What did you make of that change? Because I thought actually this was Partey probably the best we've seen him since he's come back into the team at the tail end of last season, but maybe those minutes have accumulated in his legs, and it was a chance for Arteta to bring Merino on. It's a very good substitution, a very good substitute to have. Rice went right, Merino tucked in kind of alongside him, and they played as this sort of dual pivot, double pivot, if you like, right in front of that back four, so it's these are the other faces of the game. Like when Miles Lewis-Skelly, for example, came on at the end, we went to this like traditional 4-4-2 formation. You could see it on the pitch with Havertz and Jesus, I think, were the two players on at that point, and Lewis-Skelly was on the left, and just lined up in a classic 4-4-2, break us down. But Merino coming on, good to see him get minutes, probably a little ahead of schedule. We weren't necessarily expecting him to be back, but valuable minutes for him. And what did you make of his first moments in an Arsenal shirt?
Yeah, really good to see him. Definitely ahead of schedule, and a nice surprise, because most of us were expecting him to come back after this international break. Hugely unfortunate, obviously. Arteta spoke about it again yesterday. The injury happened in his first training session. It just feels very Arsenal, that moment and that injury. But I think you could see he was slightly off the pace, both in terms of what we like to do as a team on the ball and off the ball, which is perfectly understandable. He's been out for weeks. He didn't really have a proper preseason either. So these are his first competitive minutes for I don't know, 2 months maybe since the Euros. So
Yeah.
it's perfectly understandable. There were a few occasions where maybe he didn't know exactly where to stand or where to be, but this will come in time. It's perfectly normal for him to have an adaptation period. But you could still see the core ingredients of his game, that physicality, the ability to win the ball. I mean, as I said, 2 out of 3 tackles won, 4 out of his 6 duels. There was an excellent slide tackle on Hakimi in particular, who looked to threaten on the break, and he managed to catch him up and slide the ball away. So that is what we're going to get with him. He is a very competent, intelligent guy, physically strong, and someone who will hopefully knit things together. So really good to see him back. And again, he gives us a few different options. He can play alongside Rice. He can play behind Rice. He can play ahead of Rice. So yeah, really great to see him back. And hopefully him coming back can just ease the load on a couple of players, as you said, like Partey, like Rice, because the schedule is unforgiving and we need players as close to full fitness as possible.
PSG maybe slightly agreed that they didn't get a penalty, handball, against Calafiori. I mean, for me, no, and my rule of thumb on penalties is like, if that happened up the other end, would I be angry if Arsenal didn't get a penalty? I don't think you should give penalties for that. I really don't.
Completely agree.
Accidental.
Completely agree.
The ball hits his hand. You can't give a penalty for that.
They should never be given as penalties. And I like you, I would say the exact same thing if Arsenal were appealing. Calafiori's just there. And in close proximity to the block from Saliba, he gains no advantage from handballing it. It's not like he was facing a shot from goal or shot at goal and his arm's in a weird position. I hate those kind of decisions because people just accept that they should be penalties. Why? We can use a bit of common sense and context for these decisions, and I'm glad it wasn't given because that would have made it a very nervy last 10 or so. Yeah. And I think unnecessarily so, because I hate when those are given. I just don't think there's any reason why the defender would intentionally be handballing the ball there.
I might talk a little about Gabriel Jesus in a different podcast, maybe towards the end of the week when we preview our game against Southampton over on Patreon. I think there is a conversation to be had about him. But ultimately, I think this second half is one where you could use the word professional. This performance in general is one where you could use the word professional. Arteta says it raises the confidence and belief that we can compete with any team at that level in European competition with the style of games that are very different to the Premier League. We showed a lot of maturity in the way we played and put our stamp on the way we want to behave in Europe against top teams, and I really like that. And I think there is, some people will say, well, maybe you should try and dominate the game a bit more, maybe not let PSG have that much of the ball. But, if the shoe's on the other foot and you're on the other end of that 2-0 scoreline and you have lots of the ball and you can't break it down, ultimately you're looking at the opposition and saying, well, they basically held us at arm's length, which is what we did to PSG beyond a couple of speculative moments. We held them at arm's length. We had the confidence to do it, the quality to do it, the belief to do it. Luis Enrique said Arsenal were much better in terms of intensity and pressure. They won every duel. And I think those quotes tell the story of the game from an Arsenal perspective. One we can be really pleased about. Solid win at home, clean sheet, scored a couple of goals. And, as we said, on paper, PSG is a big game. And I think people were going to look at this and say, where are Arsenal in their development? Where are they in their progression? Can they just go out and do an unfussy, uncomplicated job on a team like PSG? The answer is yes. Does that mean we can do it to every team? Remains to be seen, obviously. There's a long way to go. But I think as part of the progression and a way of using a game like this as a yardstick in our development, I think last night was really, really positive.
Totally. Absolutely agreed. And there are games within games. The first half, we were aggressive, physical, took our chances when they came. And then in the second half, you could see that we tired a bit. So just change how you're playing. We were able to keep them at bay. We were able to get into our shape, structured, played in transition on occasion. There were a few lovely moves. That almost goal from Martinelli would have been incredible if we scored there. Some of the one-touch play in that corner flag was amazing. So But look at the PSG team. What would you say from that midfield in particular is what they want to do? Keep the ball. Vitinha, Zaire Emery, Joao Neves, they will want the ball. So at times you're going to have to accept that they will have the ball. Did they do anything particularly dangerous with it? No. So we did our job. We've done our job, and you can't play in this schedule, in this current climate where the games are becoming faster and fitter and stronger. You cannot play every game at 100%.
Yeah.
So we did our work. We're able to defend a lead. And it's on to the next one. Even Saka spoke about it yesterday. There's no time to think or to dwell on games now, because the next one's only a few days away, and you don't have a break. You can't drop points. So you need to manage energy and resources. And I think we've become masters at it, to be honest.
Yeah.
So a big win for us, another statement win in Europe, and it will only leave us in good stead moving forward.
Gary Breen on Premier Sports last night was saying that, he was making a point that Arsenal's defensive shape and organisation is so good that in some ways it allows the players to get a little bit of a breather within the game, because everybody is so organised. Nobody's running around like a madman to try and close down spaces, that when the opposition have it and we settle into this, as you called it, what did you call it earlier? Murder ball or low block, whatever it was.
Football terrorism.
Yeah, the low block. That in some ways it allows you to conserve energy, because you are essentially moving as a unit rather than individuals running all over the place. I don't know if that's true or not, whether it's just a sort of happy accident as a byproduct of what we can do defensively. But like you say, you don't have to. You have to win every game 4-0. You don't have to play every game at 100 miles an hour. And in this sort of weird, convoluted group stage, to come through this game with a clean sheet and a good win, 3 points on the board after drawing away. All in all, a very positive night. All right, we better leave it there. As ever, Phil, thank you very much.
Pleasure chatting, mate.
Thank you very much indeed to Phil, and you can find him in all the usual social media places. Right, I think we'll leave it there just to make sure we can get this podcast out to everybody as quickly as we can. We will, of course, look ahead to the game against Southampton at the weekend. On Friday, after Mikel Arteta's press conference, we will record a preview podcast exclusively for our Patreon members. If you'd like to get access to that and instant access to everything that we do over on Patreon, it is just $6 a month. It goes a long way to supporting everything that we do here on Arseblog. Remember, this is an ad-free website. We're relaunching our apps. They're going to be completely ad-free, so we need your support to keep doing all the things that we're doing. And if you feel like it's worth $6 a month, as well as getting a load of extra content over on Patreon, you can sign up at patreon.com/Arseblog. That is patreon.com/Arseblog. Right, let's go. Have a great day. Thank you so much for listening as always, and we will catch you on the next one. Until then, cheers. Bye-bye.